Hello, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the CEO and co-founder with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. We have worked with life science companies from across the globe over the past 14 years to help them with everything from digital advisory boards, virtual medical education, online investigator meetings, and since the launch of our award-winning Insight Events platform, we've also been helping pharmaceutical companies with their large corporate events, innovation hackathons, MSL and sales rep training, and everything in between. But more importantly at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations that we have with some of the leading edge thinkers, digital provocateurs, and healthcare thought leaders, we can all work together to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm really excited to have one of these thought leaders at the table with me today. This is actually Joshua Goldberg. He's actually the co-managing partner at Nath, Goldberg Meyer, and he's a patent attorney who helps his clients acquire patents and trademarks quickly and successfully in the US and around the world to help them protect their products, as well as to help build their company's value. He was inspired to become a patent attorney to help inventors and companies protect their technologies and bring new innovative products to market, thereby continuing to help people live in the future. As a partner in charge of the chemical, pharmaceutical, and biotechnology department of his firm, Joshua's practice involves portfolio management and analysis, including the preparation, prosecution, and acquisition of US and foreign patents across a wide range of technology areas. These are things like conducting re-examination proceedings, obtaining patent term extensions, doing things like conducting paragraph 5 analyses, the preparation of patentability, the freedom to operate, non-infringement, and validity opinions, things like pre-litigation analysis and client counseling. So a whole slew of things that we're probably going to be able to dabble in today. And also doing things like patent portfolio valuation, and as well as conducting licensing negotiations. So tons of things. Thank you, Josh. So happy to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Natalie. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. So we are kind of all things digital, but we did want to bring you in because there's, the world of digital has all kinds of permutations and, considerations that, are digital. So before we get started on that, why don't we actually learn a little bit about you? You have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. So oftentimes people will go down that route. Tell us a little bit about your career trajectory and how you landed where you are today in the intellectual property law space.
Oh, I'd be happy to. So like you just said, I do have that chemical engineering background. And not only did I study chemical engineering at university, but I also actually worked in industry for a couple of years doing drug composition work. What does that mean? So I worked for a very small outfit out in St. Louis, which is where I went to university. And what we did is we had big pharma companies, think the Mercks and Pfizers of the world, who developed and created these new actives, these new drugs. They needed to find a solution to how do you put it in a pellet or a capsule or a tablet? How do you coat it so it makes it through the stomach into the intestines? All sorts of things like that, that they would come to us to try to develop that solution for them. So I used to work with spray dryers and polymers and all sorts of things to try to come up with this type of solution. How do we actually put your new drug in a formulation for you? It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But for a variety of reasons, it also made me realize I was not put on this earth to be a bench scientist. It's that simple. And I used to have, while I was studying, a professor at university who had a patent lawyer buddy. And he would tell us stories about his patent lawyer buddy all the time. He had a ranch out in Colorado that he took his private helicopter to, and he had his half dozen or so fancy cars. And I'm thinking to myself, gee, this doesn't sound so bad. I can do all of these things. So instead of becoming a long-term scientist or engineer, I went to law school to become a patent attorney. Well, I did that quite a while ago. I graduated from law school in 1999. I don't have a ranch in Colorado.
I was just going
If
to ask you that. What
Yeah,
about all
no.
your fancy cars? Was that, yeah,
My
working on
fancy
that.
car is a mini Clubman, if you consider that fancy. Um, I enjoy it. I like it, but that's who I am. And I have to tell you, if I had a private helicopter, I probably wouldn't fly in it because I have a fear of heights. So um, none of that worked out. Yet I'm still very happy with the career I've chosen for myself.
Wonderful. Awesome. So let's actually dig into this a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what intellectual law is and means, and
Mhm.
specifically how it applies to life science companies and or all of the consumer electronic or small digital, entrepreneurs, small companies are now dabbling into this. Tell us a little bit about all of that.
Sure. So any of those companies that you mentioned, whether it's a life science company, a smaller electronics company, consumer products company, they're all trying to do something different than everybody else, whatever that is. They either have a new invention, a new technology, a new name or brand or logo, something that distinguishes themselves from everybody else in the marketplace. What I do is I come in and I help them turn that something new, that unique identifier, into a concrete right, a registration. Think of, if you buy a piece of property, you have your deed that tells you what you actually own. This is no different. I get them their registration that tells them this is what I actually own, so that now when they're in the marketplace, they can stop others from doing that exact same thing. They can keep that market to themselves. Now, if somebody else comes up with their own innovative solution, can they compete on that basis? Sure, but that's fair competition. I create something, you create something, we go out in the marketplace and we see what's better. That's fine. I don't think anybody's going to argue against that. What I do is make sure that especially for those health life sciences companies, you've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into creating something new. You've spent a lot of money on developing it. You want to actually reap some rewards from it. I help you make sure that happens without somebody else swooping in and taking it from you.
100%. So what are some of the typical, and again, I'm going to talk about pre-COVID because I think the world has kind of changed and went upside down, and there's just been a propellant or a tailwind around all things digital. So let's think about the prior world. What were some of the IP pitfalls or concerns that you were seeing in the world before COVID?
Well, in the world before COVID, it actually hasn't changed that much in the post-COVID world, other than how you go about getting from I have an idea to let's protect it, right? The biggest thing pre-COVID was, what do I have? What did I create? And did my inventors or my scientists or my researchers actually put it out there to the world before I could file something on it? This is probably the most common issue that we face all the time. So when you invent something, you want to file your patent application first before you publish on it. While in the university world, it's publish or perish, in my world, it's publication kills, because that now is considered something that would be prior art against whatever I'm doing. So if I published, say, I created a new oncology cancer drug, and I published on that back in 2020. It doesn't matter what year what month it is, what day. And now here we are in 2022. I want to now file a patent application on that same drug. I can't do it anymore because I have donated that drug to the public by publishing it, putting it out there before I actually tried to protect myself.
Well, this makes it a really interesting conundrum, especially in the world of shared knowledge. Knowledge is free. We hear about platforms like the GitHubs where there's shared code and it's open code, and there's a whole philosophy and culture around that. How do we balance the need for patent tradability or, all of the IP protection, while at the
Mhm.
same time trying to foster innovation in a really rapid and efficient manner?
Sure. That's a really excellent question. A lot of people spend a lot of time looking into it and trying to figure out the best way. There's no perfect solution. But what I can say is if you are working on something innovative, unless it really is something that's done in collaboration with multiple people in multiple places, you're going to want to try to do something to file on it before you put it out there. And what we often do, we have a client that comes to us and says, hey, I have this new invention, this new technology I created, and I want to publish on it, or I'm going to publish on it, or I'm going to speak about it in 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever that time frame is. We say, all right, that's fine, not a problem. We can file what's called a provisional application for you, something very quick. We can get it done in 1 or 2 days that reserves your spot at the patent office. And that then gives you 1 year to do something more, develop the idea further, prepare a full patent application, whatever it is you need to do, so that even if you publish or speak within that 1 year, you can still go back to that provisional application filing date and you're okay.
What is the advantage? I'm thinking specifically about smaller companies, ones that maybe don't have the manpower or the financial power to be going after these patents. What do you say is ultimately the benefit, or why would these companies want to consider getting a trademark or a patent?
Well, that's a great question. And it's something I talk about a lot, especially for smaller companies, startups, companies that are just getting out there. In the healthcare space, if you're working on a new drug, you're going to need a lot of funding or a partner to pay for all your clinical trials and getting through the regulatory process. It's very difficult for those companies to do everything on their own. That means they need to find somebody to either buy them, fund them, acquire them, license technology from them, whatever it is. And I can tell you, one of the first questions when you're looking for those partners is going to be, what's your IP position? Okay, what have you done to protect yourself? What have you done so that if I'm going to invest in you, whatever shape that investment is, I'm not taking a huge risk that that investment is basically money that's gone, I'm never going to see again, right? So, I've talked with a lot of people, and generally, if you go and you talk to these partners and they ask, what's your IP position? And you say, oh, I've been thinking about it. I mean to get a patent. What is IP? Why do I care about this? Not only does your ask keep going down and down and down, but that might be the end of the conversation right there. If instead you could say, well, look, I do have this clearly laid out position. I've gotten these 3 patents. I have these trademarks. This is what I'm going to do next. These are the areas I've left open for my partners to work on. Not only is the conversation going to be able to continue, but your ask is just going to keep going up and up and up.
There are some companies, let's be really honest, like the big 5, and not doesn't even have to be, they can be mid-market. They're very large. They have the legal suite, they have the financials, they have the wherewithal to be able to actively protect and manage their patents and trademarks. Come in the small company, they've got, a couple of people, everybody's staying overnight, and they're, just trying to make ends meet, and they haven't hit profit yet, and they're just getting into the market. How do you still manage the benefit, if you will, of going after the patent at that stage when it's really essential to protect it, but at the same time they don't have the ability to be navigating, researching, and finding out if somebody's infringing on their patents? What do you tell those companies?
Well, again, when we're talking about the healthcare space, I'll use that as the specific example here. Most often at those early stages, there is not somebody else out there in the market. So you don't have to be as concerned yet about somebody else being out there and infringing on your patents. The other thing that you have to consider is if you are looking for these partners, these long-term relationships, people to fund you, to help you advance, most of big pharma, most of the big 5 that you just talked about, they don't do their own R&D anymore, or if they do, it's nowhere near at the level of investment that they used to have. Instead, what they do is they look for all these smaller companies that you're talking about who have all of these innovative new technologies. And they look to cherry pick the ones, okay, these are the most advanced on the technology basis. These are the ones that have a good IP position around them. So as we go forward, if this really is something, we're not taking a risk on that front. And they'll invest in those companies, either through acquisition, license, what have you, as their new means of R&D. So if you're going through the process and you're going through the development and you're not doing everything you can to say, okay, I'm checking this box. Yes, I have it. I'll go back to oncology because I've been talking about it. Yes, I have some good in vitro study results. Yes, I have some good mouse model results. Yes, I have my technology protected. So where if you invest, you feel your investment is safe on that front. Unless you do those things, you're not going to be able to get the investment. You're not going to attract that interest. And you're still just going to be spinning that same wheel over and over and over again.
In your experience doing these, patents, et cetera, for smaller companies who potentially are, there's an M&A involved with larger companies, what have you seen deals falling through because people do not have a patent position? Or B, have you seen that if they do you see the differences in perhaps the valuation of companies that have an IP position versus those that do not?
That's absolutely 100% yes. So not only do I see deals falling through if there's no patent position, generally I don't see a deal getting to a stage where there's even a deal under discussion if there's no patent position. Where I will see deals falling through is once the partner looks at the patent position. Oh, well, you only protected this part of the technology, but not this part. Or you only have protection here in the US and no opportunity for something in other countries. Those are places where a deal might fall through. Other things I've seen are, well, have you actually looked at it? What have you done? Work have you done to have a full package that you're bringing to us besides just the science? Those are really common. Where deals fall through on the valuation side, if you don't have a patent, your valuation is going to be much lower. I just started talking with a company this week where they have a very huge valuation, very large, for, again, an oncology product. They only have one patent, but that one patent covers exactly what they're going to do. And they have filed in a number of markets around the world where it's still pending. So they're protected outside the US as well. That shows a strong valuation, that supports the strong valuation that this is the size of the market. And you partners can be confident if you invest in us, your investment is safe on that front. Now, of course, you still need to get through all the scientific hurdles, get through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, whatever it is. And as we all know, many products fail at those stages, but that's part of the inherent risk in the healthcare space. You want to minimize anything beyond those inherent risks as much as you can.
So I'm a small biotech firm and I have some innovations and I want to go down the track of a patent. I'm going to contact NGM. What is going to be the process? Tell us about the timelines and the costing, and what does this workflow look like?
So I just want to make sure I'm answering what you're asking. So this is a new biotech that has not done anything yet to protect themselves, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the first thing that we would do is we would have a conversation, just like you and I are having a conversation. I would want to understand who the company is, what their technology is, what their business goals are, where they're trying to get to. Because I don't believe in doing work for the sake of doing work. I was taught, and I believe I only want to do things that enhance the value of the company, that make business sense. And let's say we have that conversation, and from my perspective, everything looks good. Yes, you have some brand new technology. No, it has not published yet to where there's no sense of even proceeding. Yes, we have the right personality fit. We can work together, all of those things. What I would do is have an engagement agreement between us and that company. What does that do? It says that we're your lawyer, you're our client. Everything we do and say between us is privileged and confidential. I can't disclose it to anybody. I can't discuss it with anybody. If anybody tries to get it from me, they can't. It's like an NDA on steroids. Okay. So that's where I would start. Then we would start by doing a search, a patent search, making sure before we spent a lot of time and money and effort and resources that, yes, this genuinely is new. Nobody else has done it before. And that's the kind of thing that is normally $750 to $1,000, something like that, a smaller investment. And when I say smaller, it's because if you have a new pharmaceutical invention, a new biotech invention, to draft a patent application and get that filed, you're now looking at the $8,000 to $15,000 range, depending on exactly what it is. So that's to get started. We do a search, the search comes up good, we draft a patent application, we get it on file, and we start moving on. Okay. Once you get that patent application on file, of course, you want it to turn into a patent at some point. On average, it takes 2 to 4 years from when you file your patent application to get a patent. That's a long time. Now, we've found a way that if you pay a little extra money to the government here in the US, we all know the government likes to get its fees and get its money, you can get advanced out of turn. You can go to the front of the line, and we can get you a patent within less than 1 year. So if you think about it, that's at least a 50% reduction in time. If you're a small company looking for funding, that could be huge for you. Okay. What does that process look like in cost? Well, we generally have to have a negotiation back and forth with a patent examiner at the US Patent Office. The patent examiner says, I think you do not deserve a patent for reasons X, Y, and Z. And we say, well, no, you're wrong. We deserve a patent for reasons A, B, and C. And we go through that negotiation, usually 1 or 2 rounds, and then eventually we come to an agreement and we say, okay, yes, no, this is why we're going to get a patent, and we get you your patent. That process can be anywhere from $1,000 to $8,000, depending on how difficult the examiner is being. And then you have a US patent. But again, remember I talked about the need to file around the world. You have 1 year from when you file your first patent application to file around the world, or else around the world is lost. One thing we do very often, we file what's called a PCT application, Patent Cooperation Treaty. What that does is that says, okay, we are interested in international protection. We're not yet ready yet to file in all those countries, wherever it is we want to. So we're going to make a reservation. We're going to reserve our right to file around the world for another 18 months. So instead of having to file around the world at 12 months from when you actually did something, you now have a total of 30 months to do that. And for small companies, that's huge because it lets them defray costs until they know what they have, till they have some more funding, all of those things. And if you're looking at partners and they see you have a pending PCT application, oh, I can decide where I want to file, and that option's not lost. Great, you're doing everything that I want you to do.
100%. Wow, sounds fantastic. So again, a huge need for going international and a huge need for decreasing that patent process to as minimal a time as possible. So some interesting ideas. We talked about the world changing and everything is digitizing. There's a digital transformation going on globally, and more specifically in healthcare and in the pharma and life sciences space. I'm sure you've seen all kinds of new novel technologies, everything from software as a medical device to other sorts of regulated sort of new technologies, and the speed at which things are happening. I was just curious as to how has your management of IP changed with the advent of these new rapid technologies in the life sciences space?
Well, there are a few things. Number one, we used to go and visit all of our clients regularly. Walk the floor with them, talk to their researchers in person, see what there's going on, what they're doing. Clearly, I have not been doing that over the past 2 or so years. Nobody's been doing that. So what does that mean? I've had now to partake of some of these new digital technologies like you've been mentioning, like Zoom that we're talking on now, to try to get this information that I used to be able to do in person. It's very interesting. A lot of the companies I talk with, I talk with other lawyers, people in charge of the company. Have you been in person or working from home? Oh no, we've been working from home because the only people allowed to go into the office are the researchers. They need to be running the experiments in their labs and things like that. The digital transformation has not changed that aspect of what they're doing. You still need to do your titrations. You still need to check your cell lines, all of that. And that can only be done in person. So that has changed. That has not changed. But what has changed is how you record your data. Everybody used to use, their lab notebooks, and we used to have very stringent requirements. This is what we want you to see in your lab notebooks, things like that. Now that's all being done digitally. So people can share information more readily with us. The speed at which we're able to progress and get through a patent application, get through initial analysis and study has increased exponentially, I would say. Sometimes that's really good because we're waiting on data, waiting on information, and we get it much quicker than we used to. Sometimes it's less good, quite frankly, because somebody will come to us and say, yeah, it used to be that we had 2 months before this was going to be out there. Now it's 2 weeks or 2 days, something like that. And really it has to make us accelerate our process on our end to make sure rights are not lost.
It's a very funny world out there. Again, when we talk about the traditional way that there's blockbusters and something truly novel and something that's truly patentable. And now we live in a world of mashups and amalgamation of various other sort of IP, and suddenly I have something new. In addition, the concern of people lurking online and doing things like patent trolling. How do you sort of help and protect individuals around this new milieu and this new ecosystem that we live in, where everything is open and available, and then there's mashups and what's truly novel and what's really patentable?
Right. Well, if you go back just a few minutes to when you were asking me, what does the process look like? Once we have that attorney-client relationship, I said we start with a search. I always recommend starting with a search to make sure that we do genuinely have something new, that there isn't somebody else who came out there beforehand. In the health tech space, when you talk about patent trolls, I'm less concerned about patent trolls for smaller companies, startup companies, things like that, because generally they don't have a product. They don't have something out there in the marketplace. And until there are sales, until there is a market, the patent troll is not going to bother, because quite frankly, they'll sue you and get what? Nothing. Why are they going to waste their time and effort? It's different if you're in, more of the pure digital space, or if you actually are selling, cars or pens or whatever it is, where there is a marketplace out there. The other thing in the health tech space is you have this regulatory hurdle, this barrier. So even if you get your patent, even if you have your invention and your technology worked out, you're not necessarily getting into the market until you've gotten the approval from, the authority in whatever country it is. Here in the US, it's the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. Somebody else can't get out there and compete with you until they've gotten through that regulatory hurdle also. So patent trolls, to me, they're less worrisome, less of a concern in the health tech space than they are in many other spaces.
Yeah, really interesting that there's definitely a high barrier to entry for sure. We kind of want to end on this last question, which is a little bit more provocative, and that is, we're living in a world of blockchain, smart contracts, DAOs, chain link, Oracle chain links, all kinds of new technologies. At the end of the day, the premise behind this is reducing the need for trust between different entities. And eventually, the idea is that it's permissionless. It executes without third parties. I'm wondering if this is a discussion that the lawyers, attorneys are having conversations about. What is this going to look like, and how will this kind of technology impact things like patent law?
Well, again, it comes back to the idea of publication kills, right? So what you want to do in this new world is make sure that if you are discussing your invention, your idea, your creation with somebody out there, whether it's in person or digitally, that you are able to lock that down to some extent. I'm not going to tell you you can't talk about it with anybody, but you talk about it under an NDA. You talk about it under the understanding that we're collaborating on this. This is not being put out there for public knowledge, but it really is private, privileged, confidential, all of those things. You really don't want to be part in any of these public digital until you know you've done something that protects you. It really is. I'm not going to tell you don't do it. I'm not going to tell you, don't participate, don't use the new technology available. Just think about what you're doing and do things in the right order.
Beautiful. Well said. Well, that kind of comes up to our time. I think this was a really interesting conversation and a lot of things for people to consider. If anybody's interested in speaking with Joshua Goldberg, his contact details are obviously have been on his screen the whole time. It's also in the show notes below. So please feel free to connect and collaborate and see if you might want to partner. If you enjoy this conversation, please also check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations that we have with physicians, payers, allied healthcare providers, patients. We connect them with life science companies, pharmaceutical companies, through a series of synchronous, so real time, and asynchronous, not real time, touch points throughout the year, helping them plan and due diligence on strategy, protocol development, changing the paradigm, doing different things about what they're doing with their brands, if they're bringing in technologies, if they're going to be doing partnerships, so we can get work done in a really seamless and efficient and very cost-effective manner. So check out impetusdigital.com. We'd really appreciate if you can like and subscribe to our channel, and please leave us some feedback on iTunes. We want to thank everybody for their time today, and thank you, Joshua, for a fascinating conversation.